All right, so let's talk about ZRL. Now, for those of you who watched my video last week, 100 plus viewers, thank you for that. And saw me talk through my strategy for this race, for this week's race. Knew exactly what I was going to do, knew exactly what needed to be done in order to get the better of me on this race. Now, I will spoil it up front and say that 24 of you did exactly what I said to do and way better. So I was very much surprised at how hard the stage was. I was very much surprised at how fast the stage was. And truly impressed by the teams that, not only the teams that took first and second, because I feel like they hit a strategy that I hadn't thought about when it comes to sprinting and when it comes to larger format races. And what I mean by that is a larger population size races. And so it really made for a great experience, some learning lessons, and some sore legs today. Now, thank you to those of you who were streaming your race yesterday. That gave me an opportunity to go through and, really see what the race was about, whether you were in A/B category or C and D. Obviously, me being in C pace group meant that I would focus on the 3 laps around the Fine and Sandy course versus the 4 laps. But either way, some lessons were learned in watching your guys' races and seeing what the tactics, how team tactics played out. Now, in our race, as we got going, it started off pretty mild. And it really did feel like people were purposely holding back, knowing that the first climb was very short into the race, kilometer or so, and it was not going to be an easy ascent up that climb. Even though it's not a long climb, depending on your skills and abilities, it's probably like a 1-minute climb, if that. Now, I do want to rewind a bit, because when I start going through the video and cut over to that, you'll see that I'm not on camera. Why? Because as I was setting everything up, my computer decided it just didn't want to cooperate. OBS was having issues. My file explorer was having issues. Discord was having issues. And so I'm just glad I was able to record the race. Now, I did use a second computer to get a rear view angle. So you'll see both of those. But the reason why you won't see me on camera is because at the last minute, I was like, you know what? Let me just record the entire screen. And because I did that with only minutes to go, ultimately I ended up not being able to, or not thinking about my OBS setup and needing to, put my camera view over top of the screen record. So it is what it is. Technical difficulties happen. I'm just glad that the technical difficulties that happened had nothing to do with my ability to race. Now, the other thing I did do yesterday, which is in direct violation to one of my personal rules, and that's no maintenance on race day, I ended up getting the Zwift Cog and Click V2. Thank you, Paul, for the recommendation in the Facebook response you sent me. But I got the Click and Cog V2. I've been wanting to switch to that primarily because the Zwift Clicks operate as a good backup for my play controllers. So if my steering for whatever reason fails, I can always turn those on, get those connected, and still have virtual shifting. And then with all the mechanical issues I've had with my mechanical gears recently, even though I did clean all that up and get it working, decided, you know what, time to make my setup a little more universal. And I've got to say, at 5:30 p.m. yesterday, literally 2 hours before a race, I got the itch to install the Zwift Cog. And so I started looking at videos, started checking out, okay, what does it take to get this thing installed? Is there any risks? And as I started going through the videos, I ended up watching 2 of Zwift's videos where they demonstrate like how to do it for my trainer. And after watching those, I was like, you know what? I'll go ahead and try it out. Doesn't seem too risky. Seems pretty straightforward. I double checked everything before I actually got going. Everything felt good. And so I left it at that. And so again, I am glad that did not become a factor in how my race went. So as we kick off the race, like I said before, felt good. The pace felt good. We hit the first climb. Now I ended up pushing a little bit too hard on the first climb. As I was making my way up the group, I was getting to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm working a little too hard. I'm pushing myself up to the front. I didn't want to stay off the front on the climb, even though, like I mentioned before, last week, my focus was on pushing the race, pushing hard. And so I kind of drifted my way up and thought, you know what? I'm holding somewhere between 4 and 5 watts per kilogram. Initially touched a little bit of a 6 watt per kilogram going up that climb. And as I started making my way up to the front, I was like, I don't want to push off the front of the group. Like I didn't want to go too hard on that first climb because again, last week I ended up doing the route itself, not the entire race format of the route. So just a single, essentially one lap. And it hurt, put a sting in my legs. I ended up doing a TTT right afterwards. So it wasn't enough to where it discouraged me from this course or made me feel like, okay, maybe I need to rethink about my strategy here. So went over the top of the first climb, stayed with the group, did exactly what I said I was going to do. Felt good. Made it to the first sprint. Made it in the top 20-ish in the first sprint. I think I ended up averaging like between 20 and 22 on the sprints. And again, lap one down, felt good. Now, I ended up going back through not only my race and, while I was looking at this video for editing, but I also, in the meantime, ended up watching Casual Creations race, which he specifically was the one that kind of inspired me to make the last video that I made about, how to race this race versus just looking at a recon ride. And his team, for good reasons, ended up getting either first or second. And then Sisu ended up, same thing, first or second on the stage. And when I was looking at his race, I was like, man, their team did something that I initially saw in my race video. Where I was like, man, I wonder if that strategy worked better. And so when I saw his, it just kind of helped confirm that strategy was a little bit of a better idea. Now, as I mentioned previously, my focus when it came to sprinting was, I was going to hang off the back a little bit and then push through the group. Made it very easy, saves a lot of watts, and you get the potential of basically making your way up to the front while everybody else is kind of going max speed, and you're able to utilize that to capitalize on, getting through these segments a little bit faster and also getting to the front of the segment in a better position. And so that's basically what I did. Every time, whether we, coming down the Mech Island climb, I would do my best to kind of coast off the back, stay with the group, and then as we hit the boardwalk sprint, do my best to, kind of surge through the group and see what placement I got. Same thing with the sand sprint. But when I saw his video, and I saw this in my own editing, it seemed like there was this pack of people that would push off the front, and then they had this little like cluster that just kind of jumped forward. Now I would, from 20, 30, 40 positions back, sprint and basically catch up to that front pack every single time. But when I looked at his results, I was like, man, he was top 10 almost every single time on every single sprint he did. And it really came down to them being off the front and that little cluster kind of moving together off the front really made a bigger impact than I would have imagined it would. Because going into this, the perception and what you'll hear when it comes to Zwift sprinting is stay in the pack, back of the pack, start your sprint, time it right, and you'll be able to make your way through the pack and you'll get good results. And that does work a lot of the times. This time around, there was clusters that started to form. And this is how fast this race pace was. There was clusters that were starting to form. So what would end up happening, and you would see this specifically coming down the Mech Island climb, is everybody would string out. And then as everybody got strung out, a cluster of 10 would form up front, and then another cluster of 10 to 15 would form in the middle, and then another cluster of 10 to 15 more would form behind that. And we would have about a 2-second gap in between each cluster. So nothing major. Very easy to bridge. Everybody would come together after the sprint, no big deal. But what I started seeing, and the lesson that I took away from it, is maybe the next time around, instead of trying to sprint from the middle of the pack or the back of the pack, thinking that the entire pack is clustered together, focus on maybe staying with that front 10. Even if it means sometimes you get pushed into the wind or into, but it may not be as easy staying in the draft. You might be putting out a little bit more watts just to stay there. But ultimately what I saw is the people who did that, specifically the Z-Sun and the Sisu team and everybody else, because there's other teams that were up there too, including our dirt guys. The people who did that ultimately got better FAL results versus someone like me that was trying to come in from, 30, 40 positions back, 50 positions back, and make my way through the pack. Yeah, I did get a good amount of draft savings on it. I didn't sprint my hardest on any of the sprints. I didn't have to. I was doing, I think the most I hit was probably like 800, 850 watts. And I was able to coast through the pack, get good results, get a lot, get some good points for the team, kept us in third place. Our team did fantastic, when it comes to our sprinting abilities. We have a team of people who sprint really good and a team of people who, who are stronger on the, longer steady state efforts. But we all did fantastic. And so going back to it, when I saw that, I was like, man, maybe had I have pushed harder to stay closer to the front, I would have gotten better results. Because again, my aim was push this race as hard as I can, get as many top 10 results as possible. And ultimately, I ended up getting a lot of top 20 results. And I'm happy with that out of a peloton of 100 people. Top 20, I think I still did well. But the results could have been better. And so as we hit the third lap, and little by little, you'll see this when I go back through the editing. Little by little, you'll see this. Every time we went up the climb, it would be just a little bit harder. I would hang off the back a little bit further. And little by little, I was getting stretched out and stretched out and stretched out. And it got to the point where by the time we got to the third lap, the very first climb on the third lap, I just couldn't hold on. I started the climb, did well. As I got to the top of the climb, I was right on the back. I didn't push through as hard as I could. And as we hit the backside of that bridge, I felt comfortable with where I was at. I was like, oh, I'll just, catch up a little bit on the descent like I had in the previous laps. But as we started making our way through, I started looking at the gap in the chart between me and the riders in front of us. And I started realizing, oh, I'm behind a very big gap. And next thing you know, I'm 10 seconds back, still descending, while the group in front is now on the flats and moving forward. And at that point, I let my guys know, hey, like the race is basically over for me. Like there's no way I'm going to be able to close that gap, especially by myself. There were a couple other riders that were right behind me, but even 3 people without really putting hard sprints, we would not be able to catch 10-second gap at that point. Again, this was coming up to the boardwalk sprint. Now, I thought initially I could power through the boardwalk sprint and push as hard as I can and then get to basically latch back on. But all that really did was bring me in a couple extra seconds. I reeled in a couple extra seconds, but the group was gone at that point. And so I just basically looked at that and said, you know what? I'm going to do my best to hold on and work with the 2 guys that were there. So I slowed down a little bit, let them catch up, and we kind of went back and forth until we, essentially until we crossed the line. And so that was, again, another lesson for me to walk away with, where I should have pushed a little bit harder on that climb. And really, I should have worked harder to latch back on immediately once I recognized that I was off. Now, in past races, that descent down the Mech Island climb, because of the dust that gets kicked up, I can't tell you how many times I've been dropped there. It has been really a thorn in my side because it happens more often than I truly care to admit. And so that was one of those scenarios where when it happened, I was like, again, this is happening to me again. Now, the last few laps, it was slow, starting to happen, but I would push, I would latch back on, be able to draft, and then kind of hold back on. And so when it happened to me on that third lap, I was frustrated. I knew that I wasn't going to come back from it. And so I just decided to, again, succumb to, my position and just do the best with what I had. At this point, I was still in the top 25. And so at that point, the goal became ensure that I stayed in the top 25 and not let the group behind us catch up. Now, there was someone in the chat that was like, hey, if we work hard, if we work together, we can catch the group in front of us. They were 30 seconds back when they mentioned that. They were not going to catch us. We only had like 4 kilometers or so left of the race. And I knew at that point because I've done those kind of bridging, trying to bridge those types of gaps before and have done it successfully, it takes way more than 4 kilometers to bridge a 30-second gap when you're not really going faster than the people in front of you. In my case, the group of 3 that we had, we were averaging somewhere in the 3 watts per kilogram range, 3.2 to 3.5-ish. The group in front of us was doing the same thing. They were in 2.8, 2.8 to 3.0 to 3.2. And, we weren't closing the distance. And ultimately, they ended up finishing and coming across the line right around, 30 seconds to a minute ahead of us. And so, again, that's how the race went. Like I said in the beginning, when I made the video last week, the intention was to talk about how to race aggressively in this race, how to sprint aggressively, and really how to set it up so that way the people who are going to shine, the people who are going to win, were the people that were really making the race work the way they wanted to versus allowing other people to determine how their race went. And if that was you and you were off the front and you set the tone, congratulations. Because this really was a lot harder of a race than I thought it would be. If you struggled and you had a hard time keeping on and you ended up falling into one of the groups in the back and you didn't come in a position that you thought you would for whatever reason, hopefully it wasn't mechanical that caused you to, drop back so far. But hopefully, if that was you, hopefully you learned something from the previous video I did. You learned something from this video, because ultimately it's going to better all of us if we become better racers and push each other to work harder. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you guys on the next race. See ya.